Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator at the Internet Sake Discord. Do come and join us sometime. And also, I run Reddit's r/sake community. Shoot us there, too.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, I'm a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake, doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand. So, John, how have you been doing? Have you had any good sake adventures or any tastings you've done recently that have been fun or exciting?
Taste sake that I like all the time, Tim. It's one of the wonders of honestly, it's one of the nice things about living in New York is that you do have access to a lot of options, a lot of variety. And I'm also, starting to plan. We're going to Japan in a couple of months, so
oh my gosh,
yeah,
that's so good.
Working on our itinerary, where we're going to go, what we're going to do, who we're going to see.
It takes more planning than you would think to successfully pull off a sake trip to Japan, I think.
It's a little bit, yeah. If you think you can just wing it when you get there, you might yeah. I mean, for going to Japan, you can wing it when you get there, but for trying to focus on sake stuff, it's a little bit trickier because people, believe it or not, the people who run these establishments and these breweries, they have lives, and they are very busy, and you've got to be respectful of their time as well. So it does take a little bit of doing.
Yes, planning really does help if you're going to Japan and you want to experience some sake things. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, today we're going to have a little bit of a combination of old and new. Okay. Today we're going to revisit our Wild Rice series.
Mm-hmm.
And the sake we're going to drink is actually a returning brand, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
All right. So we're going to talk about wild rice. Things might get a little wild in here. So who knows what'll happen.
It's not crazy rice.
Not crazy rice. All right. Yeah. So we're going to touch on a strain of sake rice that we haven't focused on for a whole episode yet. And we've done some other rice strains in the past. We've done omachi. I know that. Mm-hmm. We've done Yamada Nishiki. And today we're going to be talking about another famous nishiki. This is Hattannishiki.
Hattannishiki. Yes. If memory serves, this is when I think of Hattannishiki, I think of Hiroshima.
Yes. Hattannishiki is born in Hiroshima. And it's a relatively recent rice concoction. Hattannishiki was created, crossbred in the 1970s. And the parents of Hattannishiki are Hattan 35 Go and Akitsuho. So those are two rice varieties that were crossbred to make Hattannishiki. And this happened in Hiroshima.
That's interesting. Typically, when we hear about these rice varieties, that's often like, oh, we took omachi and we took like Yamada, or we did something with that and played off of it. I'm not familiar with either of these two rices that this one was crossbred to create. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. So they did a lot of this crossbreeding to try to get new and exciting and interesting rice varieties that had certain characteristics to it. And when they created Hattannishiki, they discovered a few things that were actually advantages that other rice varieties didn't specialize in. And the first one is the height of the stalk. So Hattannishiki is actually a short king.
I wasn't ready for that one. Sorry.
So most sake rice is known for growing taller than standard eating rice, but Hattannishiki is actually a little short by the standards of what you would say for regular sake rice. So we can say under 3 feet. And the advantage to this is that it keeps the rice from lodging. And that's a word we learned from Whitney at Isabel Farms. Lodging is when the rice falls over and kind of lands on the ground and might get stuck in the mud or the paddy. And to prevent that from happening, the actually shorter stalks are a little less prone to that because they're not up in the air as much. And if there's a typhoon or strong winds come through, they have a little bit more resistance to falling over. And they have a really nice amount of shinpaku in their structure. So the starchy core is really prominent, and that's exactly what you want to see when you're cultivating new sake rice. And I think the amount of production of Hattannishiki is about, I think it ranks 6th in overall production. So 5 other rice varieties are produced in more volume. I think Hattannishiki is ranked about 6th. It changes from year to year, but I think last stats I looked up, it was around the 6th most produced sake rice.
Wow. All right. That's pretty cool. It seems to me like a lot of the factors with this rice are practical. The shortness to make it easier to harvest, the shinpaku. It just seems like a really solid rice to use whenever you can. I mean, I'm not surprised that it's so well known and it's being used so much, because it seems like a really easy rice to work with, relatively speaking.
Yeah, but this rice strain, Hattannishiki, is really very, very closely tied with Hiroshima, the place of its origin. And, Omachi is really famous from Okayama, and Yamada Nishiki is really famous from Hyogo. And I think Hattannishiki is just tied intrinsically with Hiroshima. And you and I did an episode 23, dedicated to our stories in Hiroshima. And we tasted Hattannishiki at that time. And now we're going to focus in and revisit and see what makes it so delicious and so compelling, right?
Yeah. So yes, Tim, as you mentioned, this sake was previously featured in episode 23, and it is the Johto, quote, the one with the clocks, Daiginjo. Someone at Johto clearly has an affinity for Friends, the old TV show. So number one, Johto Daiginjo is a white labeled sake. It is one that is relabeled, when it's brought over to the United States, but is sold under a different name in Japan. Now, Tim, how often does this kind of thing happen, and what's the story behind that?
Well, we did an episode on white labeling or rebranding of sake, and it's becoming, I think, more common than it used to be. If a restaurant wants to produce their own, shall we say, vanity label or their own brand of sake, the easiest way to do that is simply to buy sake from a brewery, put it in a bottle, and put your own label on it and say, this is our sake. One of the considerations with this white labeling thing that I think Johto does really well here is that they are completely transparent about where the sake comes from, who makes it. They're proud to say that this is from this producer. And that is, in my book, the only way to fly. Because if you're hiding who the producer is in your sake, like, why are you even doing that? That does not make a lick of sense to me. So what I think Johto is doing really well here is that they wanted to create a brand, their own brand. I would imagine to make sake accessible in their view, to give it a Western label and easy to understand and easy to introduce. So I think they picked a Junmai and a Junmai Daiginjo and a Junmai Ginjo, and
I think a Nigori
Nigori as well. Yeah. And do you think that's true, that they're trying to make their own line to make it accessible to people and easy to approach?
I do. I think that they position them as sort of I don't want to use the word entry level, because this is a Daiginjo that we're going to be talking about. I do think that the idea is to kind of, give somebody who may be a little intimidated by Japanese sake labels, and this is something that we've talked about on the show many times, giving them something that's a little bit more friendly, a little bit more specifically, a little bit more English friendly, I think, a little more Western friendly label, so that it looks more approachable. It's something that you're not intimidated by, and there's no Japanese on it. And it's like, oh, this is interesting, and it looks cool, and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's probably a lot of the thought process behind it. Also, even though this line of Johto branded sakes, each one, I think just about every one of them is from a different one of their breweries.
Yes.
That they feature. So it's kind of like they're showcasing a different one on each. I think that's also really interesting, because if you go through all of the different Johto labeled sakes, you'll get a feel for their whole lineup of different brands that they represent. And I think that's probably not an accident also. So I think that's a good way to introduce new people to their brand family, I guess would be a good way of putting it.
All right. So as we established, this sake is released from Johto, but it is really produced by the Nakao Brewery in Hiroshima. And this sake is sold under a different label in Japan. It's the Maboroshi label, right?
Right.
Okay.
Maboroshi meaning like mystery. And it's one of the things that separates the Maboroshi brand from the other ones that Nakao produces is that they actually use apple yeast. So it's a Hanakobo. And we've talked a little bit on past episodes. Man, a lot of past episodes are culminating on this chat we're having today, Tim. So yes, this is the yeast from the apple blossom that they've been able to cultivate and use to make this sake and to make the other sakes in the Maboroshi line. Nakao also has another line called Sekio, which you may have you've almost certainly had before. Really, really great stuff, top to bottom from this brewery. And this sake that we're going to talk about today, the one with the clocks, also because it is, as you mentioned, a Maboroshi sake, is also using apple yeast as well.
Awesome. So why don't you give us the stats for the one with the clocks Daiginjo? That name just rolls off the tongue. The one with the clocks Daiginjo.
I think we buried the lead a little bit here. So this is, of course, our Hattannishiki episode. So obviously the rice in use here is Hattannishiki. Who knew? The Seimai Buai, the milling percentage is 50%. As we mentioned, the brewery is Nakao. Apple yeast in use here. The acidity is 1.3, which is very reasonable. And the sake meter value is a +5. And Tim, you know what's really interesting? We don't get a lot of these. This is not a Junmai Daiginjo. This is a Daiginjo. This is Aru 10. This is alcohol added. Now, we've talked about this many times on the show before. Alcohol added does not mean it's like they're fortifying it to make it boozy. It means that they have added some neutral spirits during the earlier part of the brewing process in order to bring out some of the aromas. Is that a good way of putting it, Tim?
Yes. They add a distillate of usually sugarcane, a neutral spirit on the last day of fermentation of the moromi or the main mash. And then that dissolves additional rice particles and allows untapped aromas and flavors to come out. So it's just a slightly alternate production method that is allowed in Japan. And this is a rare Daiginjo. You're absolutely right. We don't see as many Daiginjos as Junmai Daiginjos.
Definitely not. I think there's a big Junmai sakes are very popular right now. I think it's a nice way of putting it. There's a big a thrust towards the pure rice sake, and so I think that Aru 10 is a little bit less popular these days. But hopefully, it can make a comeback. I think that would be nice because some of those aromas are really, really fun.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So this has a lot. Reading through these stats here, this has a lot of things that are appealing to me for sure. 50% rice polish, apple yeast, mild acidity, Daiginjo grade. This is lining up to be a real stunner, I think.
Yes, it is.
Well, there's only one way to find out. Should we dive in and get this in the glass?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm picking up the bottle, getting ready to pour. And I noticed, John, this has a very distinct label. What do you see here?
There's a lot of clocks.
Yes.
So this label is actually primarily white with gold and silver foil inlays. For the most part, the gold and silver foil for the vast majority of this label are used to make little clock dials, like little clocks on them to show you, I think just about every time of day possible, perhaps.
I don't know what time it is looking at this.
No, I do not know what time of day it is. But, this is definitely the one with the clocks. There's a lot of clocks on it. And on the side, it says it takes 72 hours to mill or polish a batch of rice for this sake. Only the best 50% is used. And that's in English, because again, this is a white labeled sake for the Western market. Mm-hmm. Very, very modern label, I want to say. Yeah. It says, this Daiginjo is delicate, soft, and clean, showing hints of green apple. It should be served chilled and paired with salads, grilled chicken, sushi, and sashimi. And again, this is all on the front label.
Yes.
This is stuff that you usually get kind of like buried in the back. But I think when you're able to do the whole label for your brand, you can put this information up front, and you put this information front and center so the potential buyer can look at that and go like, oh, well, wait a minute. That's interesting.
Yes. And it also says on the front label, there's more. It says, since 2005, Johto Sake has meticulously selected every brewery and every sake we import. This Daiginjo is no exception.
Nice.
So they have a lot of messaging on this front label.
Yes. It's a lot of language.
Yeah.
And a lot of clocks.
But I want to call your attention to the back label, just briefly. There is something really unique and interesting that you don't see every day. And mine has a date stamp on it.
So does mine.
Yes.
So does mine.
What does your date stamp say?
My date stamp says 04.06.
Okay, mine says 04.09.
So this is interesting.
Is it 2004?
No.
No.
I was recently visiting my family down in Florida, and there's a Total Wines. Total Wines is a very big liquor store.
Yeah, big corporate wine store. Right?
Yes, yes. And they carry a lot of Johto products in their sake section. They actually have a sake section, at least at the one near my parents' place in Florida. And so I grabbed a bottle of Maboroshi. They had a bottle of Maboroshi there. And it also had a date that was very similar. And I was immediately concerned that perhaps it meant 2004 or perhaps 2006.
Yeah.
And then I remembered. Yes.
What did you remember?
I remembered that they reset the brewing year when the new emperor took over.
Yes.
Yes.
And
all of my concerns melted away.
My sake student, John Puma, gets an A+ for this lesson. Yes. So a lot of breweries use the Western calendar year to label their sake, and they're going to stamp a year. So it might be 23.09. That would be September 2023. And that's what you would expect to see. But this says 0409. So 04 is actually the emperor's year. And the current emperor ascended to the throne in 2019. So they refer to the emperor's year as that was Reiwa 1, and we're in Reiwa 4 now. So this was a fresh bottle of sake. You don't have to worry. And super fresh, actually. So Reiwa 4 is the emperor's year. And the reason I called that out is because it is pretty rare to see this on the label. So I think that Nakao Brewery in Hiroshima is pretty traditionalist. Like, this is old school labeling, even on their white label bottle.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think that,
So
again,
cool.
I was a little concerned, and then I realized that this must be the emperor's year.
Yes.
And then I tasted it, and I was like, oh, this is so fresh. It was. I was like, this is absolutely not from 2004. Because it was still like, I was like, what if I'm wrong? But no, I definitely was not wrong. So that was
if it
really
was
good.
2004, you'd have a real vintage bottle on your hands, collector's item. All right, let's get this open and in the glass. All right, let's give it a smell.
I couldn't help but give it a smell when I was pouring it into the glass.
Very fragrant.
Oh my goodness.
It's intense. The fruitiness is intense.
It is. It makes me think of it's so juicy in the aroma. It promises a juicy experience to me, a juicy, fruity experience. Nice and ripe and big.
Yes. And this is what I would classify as a bit of a fruit salad aroma. You know, when you have a super fresh fruit salad and you smell it, and there's melon and grape and pineapple and everything together, it's kind of like the classic ginjo aroma. This has it in spades.
Absolutely.
They boiled it down to green apple on the front label. They said this smells like green apple.
So when I think of green apple, I'm thinking like Granny Smith, but that's so much more like acidic. And I don't get a lot of that on the nose of this at all. I get all the other fruits. I get some subtle apple, but not, when I think of green apple, I just think of Granny Smith. Maybe they're referring to a different kind of green apple because Lord knows, while we were recording this episode, they've probably produced 2 new strains of apple. I don't even need to drink this. I can just take the aroma in all night. It's so nice.
Puma. I was thinking the exact same thing. I haven't taken a sip yet, and I'm just like, I can just keep on smelling this.
It's so pleasant. It's just it just makes me happy.
This is right up your alley.
Oh, it absolutely is. Totally.
It's fruity. It's concentrated. There's a lot going on in a dense space in this aroma. Very perfumed, very expressive. But if they were going for Ginjo, mission accomplished. Right?
Yeah. And it's, I wonder how much of this comes from the fact that it's Aruten. How much of this is coming from that yeast? How much is it coming from the rice getting out of the way and that 50% milling? It's such a fun question for me.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, where is this coming from exactly? But so this aroma is so beautiful though.
Yeah. I think that it's a combination of everything. Like Daiginjo, the Aruten style, the alcohol added style, is known to be more aromatic, especially in the Daiginjo category. And I think that really comes through here. The apple yeast, I mean, come on, that's known as being super fruit forward as well.
Yeah. And I think that in the past we've talked about when we were discussing Aruten that breweries will often use Daiginjo as their competition sake because it lets them harness those aromas and just go to town. And they're having some fun with this one. It is intense.
Yes. We looked on the Johto website and they said that this, as we mentioned before, this Daiginjo is sold under the Maboroshi brand in Japan.
Yes.
And this is one of 3 Daiginjos they make under that brand. And this is the entry-level one, the entry-level Daiginjo. There's 2 more above this. Can you imagine the aromas on those?
I mean, I'm willing to learn if somebody wants to show me. Wow.
Maboroshi, if you're listening.
Yes. All right. I think we've put it off long enough. I think it's time to taste.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Enough talking. Start tasting.
Yes.
Here we go. Okay. I have to say, I get green apple on the palate. Like it tastes more like green apple than it smells.
I think so too. I agree.
It has
it's lovely.
Yeah, it's very lovely. Yeah. The green apple comes across for me on the palate much more than in the aroma. But really lovely, super pleasing on the palate. Not shy. It has some body to it.
Mm-hmm. It's surprisingly full-bodied. I kind of thought it was going to be a little dainty, but definitely not.
So the alcohol percentage here is 16%. So just a smidge above average.
Yeah, just a touch. And there is, for me at least, there is that tiny little burn at the end there. Tiny little bit of the alcohol burn, but it's such a pleasure to sip on. And this is, as you pointed out, their entry level, huh?
This is their entry level Daiginjo.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Hattannishiki, honestly, I don't know what role the rice itself plays in this particular flavor. It feels like for me, the yeast is really the star of the show when it comes to producing this uber Ginjo aroma. Mm-hmm. But I do think that Hattannishiki is known for creating elegant styles of sake and a little bit richer in palate. So I think that both of those line up with this sake very, very well. This isn't a rice that I think is going to produce like super duper clean, light sake.
I think that we've definitely had other sakes on the show before that featured Hattannishiki. The Fukucho, Moon on the Water, that we've had on, that was a blend. It was Hattannishiki and Yamada Nishiki. Back when we were talking about sake breweries in Tokyo a long, long time ago, we had the Joemon from King Kon, and that uses Hattannishiki all the way over in Tokyo. And that I think was like a Muroka Genshu Junmai, so it was a bigger flavor. So it's an interesting. I want to say this is almost like an interesting rice selection for what they're doing with this sake, because I think you're right. It is maybe the yeast is the star of the show here, and that the rice is a little bit richer, or bringing something a little bit richer.
Yeah, I think it gives body to this sake. If you have this much perfumed aroma, you don't want a sake that's going to be watery and too light. So I think that this grain from the Hattannishiki brings a lot of shinpaku to it, a good amount of weight, and is going to give some heft to the body. So it's not just all aroma heavy. That's what I kind of think in here.
So Tim, this is going to be a tricky one. I don't want to stump you too much, but I think this is going to be a little bit tricky. What about food?
I was just going to ask you if you had...
I beat you to it.
Touche. I was just going to ask you if you had any memories from your several trips to Hiroshima, if you think any food you had there would be a good pairing for this sake, because we like to think about locality.
Well, it's weird because the local food there is like okonomiyaki, and that is not going to be what I'm going to choose to pair this with. It's way too big. Having said that, I have had, there was a couple of really nice tempura shops.
Oh yeah,
in Hiroshima, and it's, I know like on its face you think tempura, you may be thinking it's greasy, it's oily, it's but really good tempura when you get it from a place that's very good at making tempura. It's not like that at all. It's light and crisp, and the outside is nice and crunchy. The inside is very soft. It really it does a great job of accentuating the qualities of the ingredient that's being used. So if you're having like a shrimp, or if you're having like I had a pumpkin slice that was tempura'd. Is that the verb?
Yeah, that is the verb.
I had a pumpkin slice that was tempura'd, and I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't know about this, and it was absolutely fabulous. It was really, really nice.
And that would be great with this, because you're right. It's not heavy. It's not doughy. It's not greasy. It's light, crispy, crunchy. And the thing about high-end tempura that's amazing is that the flavor of whatever is inside really comes through.
Yes.
You don't lose anything. When they're doing it right,
that's 100%. And also, guys, if you happen to be in Japan and you want to experience something like this, this can be done very inexpensively. It's not something like, it's not going to be like $100 night. You can have really great tempura for, like, honestly, I had one of the most amazing tempura lunches that I've ever had in my life for under $10 US. It was absolutely wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And that's a really good advice. You don't have to spend a ton of money to eat like a king in Japan, because it is so many good places are really affordable. And lunch that's the secret word. Like, you can go to some of these high-end restaurants for their lunch service, and for a fraction of the cost, you can get an amazing, amazing meal. So
yes. And you're going to leave full. It's not, don't think they're skimping on it because it's lunch. It's absolutely wonderful stuff.
I think you've cracked the code. So
I'm gonna have to test this theory out. I don't know. That's how science works, tempura. Right?
Yes, that's awesome. Well, I love that. And I think the next chance I get, I'm going to have a delicious fruity daiginjo with tempura and test out your theory, but I'm on board. Sold.
Excellent.
All right. Well, John, it was so great to taste with you today. I hope you had fun exploring a little bit about Hattannishiki. It's a very interesting rice. And the thing I love about it is that it's so specific to Hiroshima and opens the door to studying about that great region. So whenever you see Hiroshima, check the sake rice and see if you're sipping on some delicious Hattannishiki. Special thank you to all of our listeners. Thanks for tuning in today. We hope that you're enjoying Sake Revolution. And if you are, and you'd like to join us as a supporter, please visit patreon.com/Sake Revolution. And there you can learn more about joining our Patreon.
Other ways that you can support Sake Revolution include going to our website and checking out our store. So we have a nice little link to our shop on the website, and we sell t-shirts, we sell stickers.
And the holidays are coming up.
So maybe, you want to get a t-shirt for the sake fan in your life. Hopefully they know about the show too. That'd be a little weird if you got them a t-shirt from a podcast that they've never heard of. But hey, or if it gets them to listen to the show, it's even better. So anyway, please raise a glass of your favorite Hattannishiki sake. Remember to keep drinking sake and
Kanpai.